So Pesach's coming up, and we know of Pesach as the Chag HaCherut, the festival of freedom. And often we talk in a very binary sense about Pesach, in the difference between exile and redemption, galut or exile, and geula and redemption. They're two sides in a sense. They're opposites. We talk in the first commandment in the Torah, I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt from the house of slavery. So exile is bad and redemption's good. That's where we aim for. And we want to throw off exile. And in a sense, our connection obviously to Zionism over the last century has done that too. Ben Gurion, who was of course the first prime minister, an important Zionist thinker as well, talked often disparagingly about the diaspora, about the exile or the galut mentality, this downtrodden, vulnerable mentality of the Jew, as opposed to the upstanding, strong and defending mentality of the Zionist who's come and built the state of Israel. Now that maybe works when we think of galut, of diaspora, of exile in a sense in terms of persecution, of slavery, of being downtrodden. And that's obviously what we often think about, given especially the last century in the Holocaust. But is exile always bad? In some ways, we know from the Torah that exile can be an escape. So, for instance, the Jewish people in the episode of the spies, they fear going into the land. And they say, let's appoint a leader and go back to Egypt. So if Egypt's so bad, if that exile is so bad, then why are they wanting to go back? Well, in some ways, there was a stability. They had just enough food. They survived in exile. It wasn't a place of ideal. It wasn't a place where they were free to think, but they could get on with life and get on with the mundane elements of life. And so they wanted to go back. So in some ways, one way of looking at exile is, of course, an escape from the challenges, the difficulties of building life in a redeemed state. But there's another element to it also here, which is that exile is a place of positivity where we can learn lessons to take into our redeemed state. And there's a rabbi called Shimon Gershon Rosenberg who died about 12 years ago. And I have a book of his, and he talks about this. And for him, there are lessons of universality. There are lessons of connecting to the world, which are important for the Jewish people, before we then connect to a place. In other words, our connection to the land of Israel, our building a state, building sovereignty in the land of Israel, should never in his mind be a substitute, be in place of our connection to the wider world. So rather than exile being abnormal, rather than exile being a problem state of being, right, living outside of the land of Israel, living outside across the world, it is also something which in a sense is able to teach us through our connection, our hope for humanity, that humanity learns how to stop hating and stop warring, and that we can impact wherever we are on that situation, that we bring that universality into the being in the state of Israel, in the land of Israel. And that's really important here when we think of Pesach as two different things, the bad exile and the good redemption. Maybe instead we can think of how we can learn about being Jewish across the exile, the diaspora, or the exile situation, even though we aspire to being in Israel, to be with a rebuilt Jerusalem, where our sense of justice and love and compassion can be expressed in Israel, as well as it has been done in the lands of the diaspora. So have a great Pesach. I'll bring out more videos as well over the next few days with more ideas. But that's all for now. Have a good day. Bye.